Okay, so this deep dive, it's different. I'm used to, breaking down game footage, not like feelings and such.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique perspective.
Right. But these post-game reflections you sent over from this softball team,
Intriguing, aren't they?
it's less about the actual sport and more like, I don't know, reading their emotional diaries almost.
It is fascinating to get this raw, unfiltered glimpse into the team dynamic. We're not talking wins and losses here, but how those outcomes are hitting the players, on a personal level.
Yeah, and heavy stuff too. We're talking what, high school level, probably judging by the
Right,
right.
like likely, yeah.
And the recurring theme, it's kind of brutal.
Brutal, how so?
It's negativity.
Hmm.
Like not just the, we lost, you got to practice more kinds, but
Okay.
defeatism, blaming themselves, blaming each other.
So it's less about the game itself, more about how they're internalizing those losses.
Exactly. Makes you think, right? Like this isn't just a slump, it's affecting them deeply.
It's a window into how performance under pressure plays out in a team setting. When those individual struggles become so public, so to speak, it can either bond a group tighter or tear it apart.
And this, sadly, sounds like a team in free fall. We're talking multiple players. And to be clear, these are anonymous, but you can kind of track individuals across the reflections saying how one error just snowballs, like they expect it to all go wrong.
The snowball effect. Classic example of what we call emotional contagion at work.
Oh, yeah, right. You mentioned that earlier. So, like, negativity is literally contagious.
In a way, yeah. Think of it like, well, oddly enough, like a virus. It spreads fastest in these high-pressure, close-knit environments, and it can impact everyone's game.
Wow. So they're already down from losses, the negativity spreading. I'm already seeing that learned helplessness you mentioned creeping in.
Exactly. It's that insidious feeling of why bother. In fact, one player even wrote, and I'm paraphrasing here, it doesn't matter if I play good or bad, we still lose.
Yeah.
Right. That's learned helplessness, plain and simple. When they start to believe their individual effort won't change the outcome, why even try? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And it becomes contagious too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Negativity breeds negativity. It's a vicious cycle.
Now, here's where I find things getting really interesting. One player pointed out that the JV teams, they don't seem to get stuck in this rut. They mess up, they bounce back, no biggie. What's the difference, you think?
Well, I think it highlights just how crucial team culture is for building resilience, even at that young age.
Okay, so even if they're not consciously thinking about it, the environment makes a difference.
Huge difference. JV teams, they often have this less intense atmosphere, more room for error without that same weight of expectation. So they're learning the game, sure, but they're also learning to trust each other, support each other in the process.
That makes sense. And speaking of trust, or a lack thereof, the leadership, or rather the lack of leadership on this team, is a huge theme that jumps out.
Right. And it's not as simple as pointing fingers at bad leaders or anything so simplistic.
Because there are those who are trying.
Exactly. There are players clearly trying to rally the team, stay positive, but their efforts just aren't getting any traction.
One player even said, and I'm quoting here, "I'm tired of running and suffering because other people don't care." Like, you feel that frustration, right? It's like they're carrying the weight while everyone else is already checked out.
Oh, absolutely. That points to mismatched commitment levels, which is a recipe for disaster in any team. When some are deeply invested while others are just going through the motions, resentment festers.
It's that imbalance.
Exactly. And it creates these two completely different realities within the same team. Like one player wrote, scored a double play today, felt amazing. Meanwhile, others are using the word suffering about that same game. Wild, right?
That contrast is really striking. What do you think enables some players to hold on to that fire, that individual drive, even when the team's struggling? Is it a personality thing, personal goals? What is it?
It's a complex mix, honestly. Individual resilience, coping mechanisms, even their underlying motivations for being on the team in the first place. It all factors in.
It makes you think, if you were coaching this team, where do you even begin? Like, cheer up. Clearly isn't cutting it.
This isn't a quick fix situation, that's for sure. You'd be talking about a fundamental shift in team culture, communication.
It's like they need a whole system reboot, not
Yes.
just a pep talk, you know?
Exactly, you got it. You're talking about a fundamental shift in the team culture, their communication patterns, maybe even revisiting the team's goals, just to get everyone back on the same page. And one powerful concept to consider here is psychological safety.
Okay, I appreciate that you have, the jargon and all, but explain it like I'm on the team. Yeah. Not like analyzing them from some ivory tower.
Fair enough, fair enough. Basically, it's about creating an environment, a space, where players feel safe, to speak up, to admit their mistakes, to ask for help, without fear of being judged or ridiculed by their teammates.
So, like, if a player messes up a play,
Yeah, exactly.
with a psychologically safe environment, they'd be more likely to say, hey, my bad, got to work on that, instead of, just completely spiraling.
Exactly. Instead of retreating into themselves, blaming themselves, that kind of thing.
Which, let's be real, is so not what we're seeing in these reflections, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's actually kind of heartbreaking if you really sit with it. Several of these players, they're just eviscerating themselves. Even apologizing for, like, costing the team the win. It's a lot.
It is. And that self-criticism, even when it comes from a good place, even when it's well-intentioned, it can be so destructive in the long run.
Yeah.
Because it breeds this fear of messing up, which then prevents risk-taking, which is, essential for growth in anything, but especially in sports.
Yeah, you got to be willing to try things, to fail to learn, right?
100%.
Otherwise, you're just stuck.
Exactly.
They're in this loop of self-sabotage, fueled by this immense pressure to perform. And it's not even just about playing well. One player even wrote about, like, worrying about looking focused on the field, even if they're totally freaking out inside.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's the pressure cooker effect in action right there. It's not just about playing well. It's about maintaining this facade that you've got it all under control. So they're dealing with this internal pressure to perform and this external pressure to maintain this perfect image. It's no wonder their communication has gone completely haywire.
Yeah, that looking focused comment, that one really got to me, I'm not going to lie. It's like, we're all so worried about appearances these days that genuine support just goes right out the window. There's a lot of talk about, gossip, negativity in the dugout. It's like the opposite of a team at that point.
And that is a huge red flag, like textbook team dysfunction. When individuals prioritize self-preservation over the needs of the team, communication breaks down. It becomes less about finding solutions and more about venting, blaming.
Yeah. How do we get better becomes, whose fault was it?
Exactly.
And sometimes it's not even intentional. One player mentioned overhearing phrases like, come on, do something, or
Yeah.
make a play, which, like, I get it. You're on the sidelines, you're trying to be motivating, but...
But the impact is completely different from the intent.
Right.
It
Yes.
reinforces that negativity we talked about. It makes players feel even more scrutinized. And I think it's a great reminder for all of us, whether you're on the field or off, even when we think we're being encouraging, our words can land very differently on someone who's already under a ton of pressure.
It's all about empathy, right? Putting yourself in their shoes.
Empathy and awareness, 100%.
And again, and this keeps coming out, you see this contrast with the JV teams, right? They're described as having this way more supportive vibe. So, like, what happens as players climb the ranks, and how do we fix it?
Part of it is natural, right? Higher stakes often bring out our, let's say, less desirable instincts.
It's like the pressure cooker effect on steroids almost.
Exactly. But that doesn't mean it's inevitable. Coaches, captains, even individual players can actively shape the team culture. It starts with modeling that supportive behavior, calling out negativity, respectfully, of course, and emphasizing the we over the me.
It's that whole we're in this together mentality
Right.
versus, like, every player for themselves. Yeah, it's easy to say that.
Sure.
But when you're the one, like, in the slump, in the thick of it, it feels impossible.
It's definitely a challenge, no doubt, especially when you're, in the midst of a losing streak and those negative thoughts start creeping in.
Did our brains go right to the negative, right?
They do.
Right.
But it starts with just recognizing those patterns. Once you can see them happening, the blaming, the self-criticism, the communication breakdowns, that's when you can start to, maybe shift them.
Become aware of them.
Exactly. Awareness is key.
This deep dive, I'm not gonna lie, it's been kind of eye-opening for me. Like, I tend to fixate on the plays, the strategy, all that.
Right. The X's and O's.
But this emotional side of teamwork, it's huge.
It really is. Think of a team's performance like an iceberg, right? What you see on the field, that's just the tip. Underneath, you've got this whole hidden mass of, emotions, relationships, unspoken rules, all that. That's the team's culture. And that can make or break their success just as much as any physical skill.
And what's powerful is, even though these are, like, just snippets, like little glimpses into their thoughts after these games,
Yeah.
you can tell this negativity is eating at them. Their confidence, their joy in playing, even their relationships with each other. It's kind of sad, honestly.
Absolutely, yeah. It highlights how important it is to address these issues head on, not just for like winning games or whatever, but for the well-being of, everyone involved.
It's bigger than the game at that point.
Always.
So, for everyone listening, here's something to chew on. Think about your teams, right? And not just sports. We're talking, work, your friend groups, your family, whatever. What are the unspoken rules that you're all operating under? Are you contributing to a positive or a negative cycle and you don't even realize it? Because I think once you start to understand those dynamics, those unseen forces, that's when you can really start to change them for the better.
Couldn't agree more. Food for thought, for sure.